Imagine, just for a moment, that money was standing in front of you tonight as a living presence. Not ink on paper, not numbers in a ledger, but a being with eyes to see you, ears to hear you, feet to follow you, and hands to bless you. If you could see it now, if you could look it straight in the face, how would you speak to it? Would you scold it for not coming sooner? Would you plead with it to stay a little longer? Or would you open your arms and say, "You belong with me, I'm glad you're here. You and I walk together from this night on." I want you to feel this very personally. For I am not speaking of a principle far away from you. I am speaking of the most intimate relationship you carry in secret, your relationship with money. Most men speak about money as though it were a cold thing, lifeless, indifferent, a mere coin, a slip of paper, a line in a book. And yet they think of it all day long. They dream of it at night. They fear its absence. They envy it in others. They long for its presence in their own lives. Tonight I will ask you to do something quite different. I will ask you to stop treating money as an object and start treating it as a living companion of your imagination. You may say, "Neville, how can I speak to money as though it were alive? It is only metal, only paper." But I tell you, nothing in this world is only anything. Everything you behold is spirit, clothed in form. Everything you call real is imagination, pushed out. Money is no exception. Money is simply the visible garment of an invisible power moving through your world. If you can accept that imagination is the only reality, then you must also accept that what you call money is imagination made visible, spirit given a coat you can touch. Now think back over your life and be very honest with yourself. How have you treated this being called money? If it had ears, what has it heard from you? Have you not said, "You never stay with me. You slip through my fingers. There is never enough of you. I don't know where you go. You frighten me. You abandon me when I need you most." If a friend heard those words from your lips day after day, would he not grow weary and drift away? If a child were spoken to in such a manner, would he come near with joy? And yet this is how most men speak to money in the secrecy of their hearts, and they wonder why it avoids them. I know your frustration. I know what it is to look at the bills and feel the knot in the stomach. I know what it is to work diligently and yet see little to show for the labor. You have tried to save. You have counted every coin, yet some unexpected expense appears and sweeps it away. You have prayed, "God, send me money," and still the purse feels thin. And so you come to believe that money is cruel, that it loves others more than you, that it is ruled by chance or favor or luck. But I tell you tonight, luck has nothing to do with it. Favor does not fall from the sky. Money is governed by law, and that law is the law of imagination. If you could see what I see, you would know that money behaves toward you exactly as you behave toward it in imagination. It is a perfect mirror. When you chase it with anxiety, it flees. When you cling to it with fear, it slips away. When you speak of it as scarce, it grows scarce. When you call it cruel, it shows you a cruel face. But when you speak to it as a faithful friend, it proves itself faithful. When you treat it as a welcome guest, it lingers. When you call it abundant, it multiplies. Money is not capricious. Your own inner speech about it is capricious, and money can do nothing but echo that inner conversation. Tonight, I want to lead you into a completely new arrangement of your mind. This is not a talk about balancing accounts or learning some outer method of trade. I am not here to teach you how to read the markets or how to speculate. I am here to show you how to become a money magnet, not by running after money, but by changing the state from which you live. I want you to know, with a certainty you can feel in your bones, that you are the one who calls money, and money must answer. You are the one who gives it character, and it must play the part you assign to it. So I ask you again, if money were here as a person, how would you greet it? Do not brush this aside as a pretty picture. Take it seriously for a moment. Close your eyes, if you will, and imagine money standing before you like an old companion. See it drawing near. Hear its footsteps. Feel its presence in the room. Now notice, without pretending, what rises in you. Is it relief? Is it suspicion? Is it resentment? Is it fear that it will turn around and leave? Whatever you feel in that simple imaginal act reveals the current state of your relationship with money, far better than any words you may say. Many of you, if you are sincere, will discover that you do not trust money. You think it is unfaithful. You think it belongs more naturally with others than with you. You secretly believe that if it comes, it must soon go. This is why I have titled this night, "This is the night you become a money magnet." For a magnet does not chase, it simply is. By its very nature, it draws. It does not beg the iron to come. It remains itself and the iron moves. I want you to become that sort of being with money, not the one who pursues it, but the one from whom it cannot escape. You may say, "But Neville, my situation is very serious. I have debts. I have responsibilities. I cannot play with imagination while my creditor knocks at the door." My dear, I am not asking you to play. I am asking you to use the one power you truly possess. You have already imagined the worst again and again. You have already pictured the bills, the empty purse, the embarrassment. You have rehearsed those scenes night after night. That too is imagination. You have already used this power faithfully for lack. Tonight I ask you to use the same power for abundance. I will make you a promise, and I do not make it lightly. If you will remain with me through this entire journey, if you will listen not only with your ears, but with a quiet, willing heart, and if you will dare to practice what you hear, then this night will be remembered as the night your old life with money ended. Not because a lottery ticket fell from the sky, not because a stranger handed you a fortune, though such things may happen, but because the center of power moved from outside to inside. From this night forward, you will know that money responds to you, that it hears you, that it follows you, that it cannot help itself, for it is only spirit obeying spirit. Before we go further, I must tell you plainly what we shall do together. First, I will show you why you must stop thinking of money as an object and start thinking of it as a presence, a living servant, rather than a dead thing. Second, I will teach you how to speak to it in the language it understands, the language of inner feeling and imaginal conversation. Third, we shall enter the holy place of sleep, and I will show you how tonight, as you drift into that borderland between waking and slumber, you may impress upon the subconscious the certainty that you are already a money magnet. And lastly, I will lift your eyes beyond the money itself to the greater truth behind it, so that you may never again live in fear of gain or loss. But all of this begins with a very simple admission. The way you have thought of money until now has not served you. If it had, you would not be listening to my voice in this way. Somewhere in the depths of your mind, you have accepted yourself as one who must work harder than others for less, as one who must struggle, as one for whom money is always just out of reach. Tonight, in imagination, we lay that self to rest. Tonight we bury the old identity and raise a new one in its place. The self to whom money comes freely, easily, naturally, as a child runs to its mother's arms. You do not need to know how this new state will produce its fruits. You do not need to know what channels it will use. In my own life, I have seen money appear through ways I could never have foreseen: forgotten accounts, cancelled debts, unexpected gifts, work that seemed to come out of the blue. None of those channels existed for me until I assumed the state in which they were natural. The bridge of incidents arises after the assumption, not before. Your task is not to build the bridge. Your task is to become the one for whom such a bridge must appear. So, as you listen to me, do not simply collect ideas. Allow yourself to feel that a great change is already underway in you. Let this thought grow in you. Tonight, I am not merely hearing words about money. Tonight, I am meeting money itself in imagination. Tonight, I am changing the way I see it, the way I speak to it, the way I feel about it. Tonight, something in me is turning from begging to commanding, from chasing to attracting, from fear to friendship. If you will allow that feeling to begin, even faintly, then the work has already started. I want you to hear me as though I was sitting with you in your own room, in your own chair, speaking not to a crowd, but to you alone. I am not interested in crowds. I am interested in individuals who are willing to test this law for themselves. You do not need a great education. You do not need influential friends. You do not need a large capital. You need only the courage to assume that imagination creates reality, and then to treat money in imagination as you wish it to behave. In fact, tonight, I invite you to lay down all your old judgments about money. Forget for a little while what your father said about it, what your teachers said, what your priest or minister may have implied, that it is evil, that it is dirty, that it corrupts. Money is not evil. The love of a certain state of consciousness may lead a man astray, but money itself is a perfectly obedient servant. It takes the shape your mind gives it. If you make it a tyrant, it will oppress you. If you make it a thief, it will flee. If you make it a faithful friend, it will accompany you. From this night forward, you shall choose its character consciously. So I ask you one final question as we close this first movement of our journey. Are you willing, just for tonight, to receive money as a guest of honor rather than an enemy, as a companion rather than a stranger? Are you willing to say within yourself, very well, I will try it. I will listen to Neville. I will lay aside my cynicism, my fear, my old stories, and I will treat money in imagination as though it were alive, attentive, and eager to serve. If you can say yes, even a small trembling yes, then I say to you with absolute certainty, this is the night you begin to become a money magnet. The old life is already loosening its grip. A new relationship is being born. And as we continue, I will show you exactly how to nourish it until it becomes the most natural thing in your world. Very well. Let us remain in this same atmosphere and go deeper into it, for the mystery does not open itself all at once. It unfolds as the heart softens. I want you to stay with this image of money as a living presence, not as a metaphor, not as a poetic device, but as a real relationship taking place within your own consciousness. You see, every relationship you experience outside of yourself is only the echo of a relationship you are already living inwardly. You never meet money for the first time in your pocket. You meet it first in your feeling, in your expectation, in your secret assumptions about life. Ask yourself quietly now, without judgment and without fear. When I think of money, what feeling rises first? Is it tension in the chest? Is it a sinking in the stomach? Is it the weight of responsibility? Or is it curiosity, anticipation, calm, and gratitude? You need not answer me aloud. The answer has already been given in your life's results. The way money has behaved toward you is the way you have assumed it would behave. It has never disobeyed you. It has only obeyed you perfectly. Most men believe money runs from them because they lack luck, or opportunity, or education, or favor. They do not know that money runs because they have inwardly agreed that it runs. They believe money clings to others because those others are clever, or bold, or born under a fortunate star. They do not see that money clings because it has been inwardly welcomed as a permanent companion. Nothing enters your world by accident. Everything enters by assumption. Why does money flee from one man and follow another? It is not because one man is loved more by fate. It is because one man secretly expects to be deserted, and the other secretly expects to be accompanied. Expectation is the womb in which all experience is formed, and expectation is nothing more than a feeling of what you believe is natural for you. If it feels natural to you to struggle, then struggle will return again and again wearing different costumes. If it feels natural to you to be supported, then support will rise to meet you again and again through different hands. I want you to understand something very tender and very powerful. The moment you begin to feel that money belongs with you, not as a hope, not as a wish, but as a quiet certainty, something begins to rearrange itself in the invisible depths of your world. You may not see it at first. You may hear no trumpet and witness no instant miracle, but the roots are already growing, and no force on earth can prevent a seed from becoming what it already is, once it has taken root. This is the reason I speak to you in this manner, as though money were already responding to your change of heart. For in truth, it already is. The outer form always lags behind the inner movement. There is always an interval between the assumption and its appearance. And it is in that interval that most men lose heart. They look again at the purse, the account, the bills, and they say, nothing has changed. And because they say it, they make it true again. Tonight, you will learn to stand firm in the interval without wavering. You must understand that you have never truly been poor in substance. You have only been poor in self-concept. You have believed yourself to be someone to whom money does not easily come, someone for whom abundance is always an exception rather than the rule. And life, obedient as it is, has acted that belief out with precision. But you are not bound to that role. You are not obliged to continue the play once you have discovered that you are the playwright. This is why I say to you that tonight is not about acquiring something external. It is about laying down an old garment of identity. It is about ceasing to think of yourself as one who troubles over money and beginning to feel yourself as one for whom money is at home. When that shift occurs in feeling, even faintly at first, you have already crossed the most difficult threshold. Let me tell you something that may at first surprise you. Money is never drawn by need. It is drawn by having. When you feel that you need money, you are living in the state of not having it, and life must reflect that state back to you. But when you feel that you have money, when you feel it with you in imagination as a present reality, then money must come to justify that feeling. Life is not responding to your words. It is responding to your state. You see now why so many affirm endlessly and see little change. They say one thing with their lips and feel another thing in their heart. They declare abundance but feel lack. They speak of wealth but sense anxiety. And life listens only to the feeling. Feeling is the language of the subconscious. Feeling is the creative command. And your feeling about money has been issuing commands all your life, whether you knew it or not. Tonight, a new command is being prepared in you, not through force, not through strain, but through understanding and acceptance. You are beginning to see that money is not something to be seized, but something to be related to, not something to be hunted down, but something to be invited in, not a master, not an enemy, not a distant prize, but a presence that responds to your own sense of who you are. And this is where the great turning begins. When you stop asking, how can I get money? And begin to ask, who am I being in relation to money? Everything shifts. For you can chase all your life and remain in the state of the chaser, or you can rest in the state of being the one who is followed. And the world must conform to the state you occupy. I have seen men who struggled for years suddenly enter a season where money pursued them from many directions at once. Not because they changed their trade, not because the world changed, but because they changed their inner posture. They stopped standing with their hands outstretched in need and began standing with their hands open in expectancy. And expectancy is the true magnet. Now listen to me very closely. The reason this teaching may feel strange at first is because it asks you to reverse the entire order of cause and effect you have been taught. You have been taught that if you see money, then you may feel secure. I tell you that you must feel secure first, and then you will see money. You have been taught that if circumstances improve, then you may relax. I tell you that you must relax first, and then circumstances will improve. The feeling comes first, the shadow follows. If you can grasp only this and live it, your entire relationship with life will be transformed. And nowhere will this be felt more immediately than in your experience with money. For money touches nearly every aspect of daily living: food, shelter, clothing, travel, leisure, and even how a man judges his own worth. That is why it is such a powerful mirror of the soul. Some of you, even as you listen now, may feel resistance rising. You may think, this sounds beautiful, Neville, but it is too simple. My friend, the law is simple. It is man who makes it complex. A seed does not need an explanation of how it grows. It obeys the law of its being. So does imagination. You already use this law every day without knowing it. We are not introducing a new power into your life. We are simply giving you conscious direction over a power you have always exercised unconsciously. Consider this. Long before money ever appeared in your hand, it appeared in your thought. Long before a bill ever arrived at your door, it arrived as an inner acceptance that such a bill was inevitable. Long before a gift surprised you, there was already a secret allowance in you that such gifts could occur. Outer events are not sudden. They only seem sudden because you do not watch the quiet inner movements that precede them. Tonight, we begin to watch those inner movements deliberately. Tonight, we turn the gaze inward with clear intention. Tonight, you learn not merely to hope for money, but to welcome it as a guest who is already on the way. And as you welcome it inwardly, outward life will have no choice but to open the door. I ask you now to suspend disbelief, not as an act of blind faith, but as an experiment in consciousness. You have believed in scarcity for many years. You have believed in difficulty. You have believed in limitation. And those beliefs have had every opportunity to prove themselves in your world. Tonight, give abundance the same fair trial. Give faithfulness the same permission to show its face. Give companionship the same voice you once gave to fear. You are not being asked to deny your current circumstances. You are being asked to deny their authority. They are not your masters. They are merely the reflection of yesterday's assumptions, and what has been assumed once can be unassumed. What has been created can be recreated. There is no finality in appearance. The only finality is in the state you accept as yourself. From this night forward, something very subtle but very real is being set in motion. You will begin to notice the way you think of money when you wake. You will become aware of the words you speak inwardly when you open your purse. You will hear the tone of your inner conversation when a bill arrives. And instead of unconsciously repeating the old pattern, you will gently, deliberately choose again. You will choose to speak as one who is accompanied, not abandoned, as one who is supported, not forsaken. And each time you choose again, you strengthen the new identity. Each time you choose again, the old one weakens. This is how transformation occurs, not in a single thunderclap, but in a series of quiet decisions made in feeling. Decision after decision, you step out of the old house and into the new, until one day you look back and realize you no longer live where you once did. So let these words sink into you now, not as an argument to be debated, but as a truth to be tested. Money follows the one who feels himself followed. Money stays with the one who feels himself accompanied. Money multiplies with the one who feels himself already sufficient. And this feeling, my dear friend, is within your reach now, before any evidence ever appears. As you continue listening, do not measure yourself by what you see. Measure yourself by what you begin to feel, for feeling is the true measure of change. And if you find even the faintest warmth of expectancy stirring in your heart, even the smallest easing of fear, even the gentlest sense that perhaps things could be different, then the door has already opened. The night has already begun to work upon you. And by the time we move through what is yet to come, you will no longer wonder whether change is possible. You will be preparing yourself to receive it as inevitable. Let us now look gently, but very honestly, at the great mistake that has followed so many men and women through their entire lives without their ever realizing it. It is not a mistake of effort. It is not a mistake of intelligence. It is not even a moral mistake. It is a mistake of concept. From the earliest days of your childhood, long before you ever held a coin in your hand, or signed your name to a check, you were taught quietly, repeatedly, and with great conviction what money supposedly is. And what you were taught was not freedom, but fear. You were told, perhaps in 1,000 small ways, that money is hard to get, that it does not grow easily, that only a few receive it without struggle, that to desire it openly is unsafe or shameful, that those who have it must be selfish, greedy, or corrupt, that those who do not have it must be noble, resigned, or unlucky. These ideas were not given to you as theories. They were given to you as emotional facts. You heard them at the table. You sensed them in the worries of your parents. You overheard them in whispered conversations about bills and debts. And before your reason was fully awake, your subconscious had already accepted a certain picture. Money as a distant, risky, even threatening presence. Think back, if you can, to the first time you ever heard someone say, "We can't afford that." It may have been spoken with love, it may have been spoken with sadness, it may even have been spoken with care and responsibility. But the feeling behind it was the same: limitation. And from that moment on, the idea of limitation began to clothe itself in the form called money. Money became the symbol of what you could not have. Later, perhaps you heard phrases such as, "Rich people are crooked," or "Money is the root of all evil." Those who want money too much lose their soul. Each phrase carved a little deeper, the same inner picture. Money is something dangerous, unclean, or unworthy of you. My dear friend, do you now see how impossible a position this placed you in? On the one hand, you were told that you need money to live, to eat, to clothe your body, to shelter your family. On the other hand, you were taught to fear it, judge it, and distrust it. Is it any wonder that it felt uneasy in your presence? Is it any wonder that the moment it came, you felt tense, and the moment it went, you felt both relief and panic? You were living in an inner conflict with the very thing you were asking to remain with you. You were not taught to see money as spirit. You were taught to see it as a thing cold, external, separate from you. A stack of paper, a number written in ink, a piece of metal. And once you accept that something is merely a dead thing, you relate to it as one relates to a corpse, with discomfort, with suspicion, and with fear. You may need it, but you do not trust it. You may chase it, but you do not welcome it. And nothing that is chased is ever at rest. This is the fundamental error that has been at the root of so much needless struggle. You were taught to believe that money is an object outside yourself, governed by forces beyond your reach. Chance, markets, authority, employers, circumstance. And once you accept that, you place yourself in the position of a beggar in the marketplace of life. You wait for permission. You wait for approval. You wait for opportunity. You wait for someone or something to decide whether you shall be fed or not. But I tell you now, with all the certainty I possess, that this entire picture is false. Money is not object. Money is relationship. It is not a thing you chase. It is a state of being you occupy. It is not something you wait for. It is something that moves as you move in consciousness. It is spirit clothed in form, and spirit responds only to spirit. It responds only to what you are, not to what you do. I have watched men labor from sunrise to sunset, exhausting the body and dulling the mind, yet remaining in consistent lack. And I have watched others, with far less outward effort, move easily into abundance. The difference was never the hours worked. It was always the self-concept from which they worked. One worked as a slave to money. The other moved as one to whom money belonged. There was once a man who came to me in great distress. He told me he worked harder than anyone in his trade. He kept precise records. He saved every possible penny. He denied himself pleasures. And yet, year after year, he found himself on the edge of difficulty. Neville, he said, it is as though money runs from me. The harder I try to hold it, the faster it slips away. I asked him to tell me, quite casually, how he spoke about money during the day. At first, he did not see the point of the question, but as he began to answer, the truth emerged from his own lips. I always say it slips through my fingers. I always worry about losing it. I always expect some unexpected bill to appear and take it away. He was astonished when I smiled and said, then it is doing exactly what you have trained it to do. You see, without realizing it, he had given money the role of a thief in his inner drama, and money, faithful servant of imagination, had played the part perfectly. He had never once imagined money as loyal. He had never once felt it as faithful. He had never once welcomed it as a companion. He had only braced himself for its departure, and so it departed. This is why I say to you that the problem was never your labor. It was never your intelligence. It was never your worth. It was the unseen pattern of thought and feeling you carried within yourself toward money. And that pattern was not chosen by you consciously. It was inherited. You inherited ways of thinking about money, just as you inherited the sound of your native language. You did not choose them. They were spoken around you. They were assumed by those you loved. And so you absorbed them without question. And once absorbed, they began to operate as law in your life. For an assumption, though false, if persisted in, hardens into fact. The great liberation in all of this is that you are not blamed for what you absorbed unconsciously. You are only responsible for what you continue once you become aware. There is no condemnation here. There is only understanding, and understanding is the doorway to power. The moment you see that your past struggle with money came not from your failure, but from a faulty concept impressed upon your subconscious long ago, the burden of shame begins to lift. And with that lifting of shame comes the first true movement toward freedom. I do not ask you to judge your parents or your teachers. They too were speaking from patterns they had inherited. They were repeating what had been repeated to them. No one in this chain was malicious. It was a sleep, a long sleep, and now you are beginning to awaken. This awakening begins with a simple but radical idea. Money is not dead. Matter, it is not an enemy. It is not a capricious visitor. It is not a force beyond you. Money is a living symbol of your own state of consciousness. It moves as you move within. It obeys what you feel to be true of yourself. It reflects not your effort, but your identity. Once you accept this, even faintly, something very important happens. You stop fighting the world. You stop blaming chance. You stop cursing circumstance. You turn inward, not in fear, but in authority. You begin to ask a new kind of question. Not, why is money so unfair? But what must I feel to be true of myself for money to behave differently toward me? This question is a holy question. It turns you from victim into creator. It turns complaint into curiosity. It turns helplessness into power. And power once felt, even slightly, never leaves you the same again. Think of how many times you have said, perhaps in weariness, what's the point? It's always the same. Those words were not harmless. They were declarations of identity. They said, I am one whose life does not change. And life, obedient, answered, so be it. Now for the first time, you are being invited to say something entirely different of yourself. To say, I am one whose relationship with money is changing now. And life must respond in kind. When I tell you that money is relationship, I mean this in the deepest possible sense. Just as your relationship with another person depends on your inner attitude toward them, whether you trust them, resent them, love them, expect betrayal from them, so your relationship with money depends entirely on your inner posture toward it. And just as you cannot curse a person inwardly and expect harmony outwardly, you cannot secretly despise or fear money and expect it to move with you in joy. You must choose a new posture, not by force, not by pretending, but by seeing that the old one never served you. And when a man truly sees that a road leads nowhere, he naturally turns. From this moment forward, I want you to hold one simple sentence gently in your mind, not as a command, not as a pressure, but as a seed. Money is not object. Money is relationship. Let it echo without effort. Let it settle without argument. Let it quietly contradict the old picture. For the old picture is already weakening, simply by being seen. As this understanding deepens in you, you will begin to notice a subtle loosening of tension. You will find that the thought of money no longer grips your body in quite the same way. The fear will not vanish all at once, but it will begin to soften. And as it softens, something new will quietly take its place. A sense, not yet strong perhaps, but real, that money does not have to be wrestled with, that it does not have to be stolen from life, that it can be approached, spoken to, and welcomed. And this is exactly what we shall begin to do as we move forward. You are being prepared now to accept a new identity, not as one who toils endlessly and worries ceaselessly, but as one whose natural state includes provision. This identity will not be given to you by the world. It must be accepted by you in consciousness first, and once accepted, the world will rush to confirm it with perfect obedience. You were never meant to live in constant anxiety over supply. That anxiety came from a mistaken concept impressed upon you long ago. Now that concept is being gently replaced, not by struggle, not by denial, but by understanding. And understanding is the only true foundation upon which anything lasting can be built. As we continue, you will feel this new identity taking shape more clearly. For now, it is enough to recognize that the struggle you thought was your fault was never truly yours. It was the result of seeing money as dead, distant, and dangerous. And tonight, that old vision is quietly dissolving. A new vision is being born in its place. And that vision sees money not as a thing to be feared, but as a living presence waiting to be addressed. And with that recognition, my friend, the door to a completely different kind of life begins to open. Now let us go deeper into this mystery, for it is here that the heart of the teaching truly begins to open. You have started to loosen your old idea of money as a dead thing. Now I will ask you to take the next gentle step and see it as something alive. Do not rush past this. Let it unfold slowly in you, for all through the scriptures, from beginning to end, you will find that nothing of importance is ever treated as lifeless. Wisdom is spoken of as a woman crying in the streets. Sin is said to crouch at the door. Death rides upon a pale horse. Even love is described as something that calls, pursues, waits, and knocks. Why is this so? Because the writers of Scripture knew what the modern world has forgotten, that everything which moves your life is a state of consciousness, and every state of consciousness is alive. When you read that wisdom speaks, it is not poetry for ornament's sake. It is revelation. It is showing you that invisible qualities are living powers. They are not abstract ideas floating in the mind. They are presences that act, react, draw near, or withdraw. And if wisdom, sin, love, and death are living powers, why would you imagine that wealth alone is dead? Why would money, which governs so much of daily life, be the one thing without breath, without response, without movement of its own? No, my friend. Money is as alive as any other state. It listens, it answers, it follows the pattern you give it. The moment you begin to accept this, you stop thinking of money as a lump of metal or ink on paper, and you begin to sense it as a servant, a living servant. And a servant, by its very nature, responds to identity, not to effort. The master does not persuade his servant through exhaustion. He commands through being. The servant obeys not because the master strains, but because the master knows who he is. This is the great reversal most men never make. They strain for money as though it were the master and they the servant. For when the inner order is restored, when you assume your right place in consciousness, money takes its place naturally as the one who serves. Consider how much of your life you have spent trying to make money respond through effort alone. You pushed your body, you drove your nerves, you sacrificed rest, you postponed joy, all the while believing that effort was the true cause of wealth. And yet you have seen, if you are honest, that effort alone does not guarantee abundance. There are those who toil endlessly and barely survive, and those who move with ease and seem always provided for. The difference lies not in the muscles, but in the mind. Not in the strength of the back, but in the assumption of the heart. Money does not respond to the sweat on your brow. It responds to the state you occupy within. If that state is one of being served, money will serve. If that state is one of serving, money will rule. And so the question before you is not, how hard will I work? But who am I being in relation to money? For life never gives you what you ask for. It gives you what you are. There was a woman who once came to me in deep distress. She told me she had been careful all her life. She saved every little coin. She feared waste. She feared loss. And no matter how diligently she managed her purse, she always felt unsafe. One unexpected expense would undo months of caution. I asked her to tell me how she felt when she opened her handbag. She said, almost in a whisper, "I feel afraid to look." That single sentence told the whole story. Her purse had become a symbol of anxiety. It was not a place of welcome. It was a place of dread. And money, obedient to that feeling, had made her dread reasonable. I asked her to try something entirely new. I told her that each time she opened her purse, she was to do so as though she were greeting a faithful friend. She was to say quietly within herself, but with feeling, "I am glad you are here. You are faithful to me. You stay with me." At first, she laughed nervously, as though embarrassed by the idea, but she persisted. And within a short time, she wrote to me in astonishment. Not only had unexpected sums come her way, but the old constant fear had vanished. For the first time, she said, she felt at ease with money. What had truly changed? Not her purse, not the economy, only the life she had breathed into her idea of money. Another man once lost his wallet with all the money he had for the week. Panic seized him at first, and his old habit rose quickly in his mind. Of course, it always leaves me. I can never hold on to it. But then, remembering this law, he arrested that thought. He went into silence and spoke inwardly to money, as though to a living being. "You are mine. You are loyal. You return to me." He did not repeat it in terror. He said it calmly, as a statement of fact. Within a day, the wallet was returned, every note intact. The bridge of incidents that brought it back to him formed without his effort. He did not chase it. He claimed it, and it answered. These are not accidents. They are illustrations of a law that never fails. Once you accept money as a living servant of your imagination, you stop treating these results as strange. They become natural. You expect loyalty, and you receive it. You expect companionship, and you experience it. You expect return, and you witness return. Now I must show you how to speak to this living presence for the first time. Not as a ritual of words, not as a superstition, but as a sincere act of inner relationship. And I must guide you carefully here, for the tone is everything. If you speak as a beggar, you place yourself beneath. If you speak as a tyrant, you create resistance. Neither will serve you. There is only one tone that brings perfect obedience and perfect ease. And that is the tone of calm authority joined with friendship. When you first address money inwardly, do not plead. Do not say, please come to me. Please stay with me. For every plea carries within it the confession. You are not here, and imagination does not hear your words. It hears your assumption. Instead, you are to speak as one who already has companionship. You are to speak as one who is already followed. The voice is quiet, the manner is gentle, the feeling is sure, and the words are simple. You may say inwardly, you are with me, you belong with me, you are faithful to me. Do not shout these words in your mind. Do not force them. Let them fall as naturally as you would speak to someone whose presence you do not question. And as you speak them, feel the ease of it. Feel what it would be like to live as though you did not have to worry about money slipping away. Feel what it would be like to handle it without tension, to spend without fear, to receive without surprise. This feeling is the true language. Money understands. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. That is only because you have lived so long in the opposite state. Do not condemn yourself if the old doubts whisper. You are not trying to fight them. You are simply introducing a new voice into the chamber of the mind. And in time, the new voice will grow strong and the old one will fall silent. It is important that you do not turn this into a mechanical practice. You are not repeating magic words to compel an outside force. You are changing a relationship within yourself. And relationships grow through sincerity, not through strain. Even if you speak to money, but once a day with true feeling, you are doing more than 1,000 lifeless repetitions ever could. As you do this, something very tender begins to happen. The coldness that once surrounded the thought of money begins to melt. The dread softens. The constant bracing for loss loosens its grip. And in that warmth, money finds a home in you. For everything in this world seeks a home, even ideas, even states. And money will always remain where it feels welcome. Little by little, you will notice that you no longer recoil when you think of your finances. You will find yourself less inclined to curse expenses and more inclined to bless circulation. You will begin to sense, perhaps without being able to explain why, that money is not against you. And that sense will become the soil in which abundance grows. You see now the great secret. Money responds to identity, not to effort. When you treat it as a dead thing, it behaves as such, cold, unresponsive, fleeting. When you treat it as a living servant, it behaves as such, attentive, responsive, faithful. The world outside always reflects the world you secretly inhabit within. And this is why I have asked you to walk with me slowly through these early steps. For before you can command wealth, you must remove the frost from your heart. Before you can feel abundance as natural, you must release the old grudges and old fears that kept it distant. The moment you begin to feel that money is not an adversary, but a presence waiting for recognition, you have already crossed a great threshold. From this point forward, you are no longer learning about money as an object of study. You are learning about money as a relationship to be lived. And relationships, once alive, change everything quietly, gently, and inevitably. Feel this now, even for a moment. Money is not far from you. It is not hiding in some unreachable future. It is not locked away behind the will of others. It is here, in consciousness, waiting to be spoken to, waiting to be welcomed, waiting to be called by a new name. And the name you give it now is not enemy, not stranger, not master, but faithful companion. If you let this sink in, even a little, the work of this hour has already begun to bear fruit. Now we move into a region far more powerful than any spoken word, far more decisive than any action of the hands. We move into the silent chamber, where your true prayers are always being spoken, for you are never truly silent within. Even when your lips say nothing, you are talking. Even when your body rests, your mind is in motion. And what you say there, in that hidden place, no other human ear can hear, is the conversation that rules your world. Most people believe their prayers are the moments when they deliberately turn toward God and ask. They fold their hands. They close their eyes, they speak a few chosen words, and they believe that those few moments define their relationship with life. But I tell you now, your real prayer is the constant inner murmur you carry with you through the day and into the night. It is the steady stream of quiet remarks you make to yourself about who you are, what you expect, and how the world treats you. That is the prayer that never ceases. That is the prayer that never fails to be answered. You may not speak aloud of money all day long. You may say nothing about it to friends. You may even appear calm and composed to the world. But within, in the secrecy of your own mind, there may be a ceaseless whisper saying, "It is never enough," or "Something will go wrong," or "I hope I can hold on this time." And that whisper, repeated 1,000 times in feeling, is shaping your tomorrow with unerring precision. The money you experience in your world is not a response to your outer speech. It is a response to your inner conversation. It answers not what you declare publicly, but what you accept privately. And because this conversation is often unconscious, men are puzzled when their world contradicts their conscious wishes. They say, "I do not understand. I speak of abundance, yet I live in lack." But inwardly, they are still speaking the language of fear. Fear, you see, is not merely a feeling. It is a dialogue. It is a continuous inward argument against your own good. It is the voice that says, "Be careful, you will lose it. Do not hope too much. Do not trust too deeply." And because the subconscious mind does not reason, because it does not weigh evidence, because it does not judge truth by logic, it accepts that fearful conversation as its command, and life, obedient as ever, brings forth the scenery to match. This is why I say to you that fear is not something to be fought. It is something to be overheard. The moment you become aware of what you are saying to yourself in secret, you have already taken the first step toward freedom. You cannot change what you refuse to hear, but the moment you catch the whisper, you can replace it. Consider how many of your worries about money arise not from present facts, but from imagined futures. The bill that has not yet arrived, the loss that has not yet happened, the expense that may never come. And yet you rehearse these scenes inwardly as though they were already real. You feel their weight before they exist. You pay them in emotion long before they are due in fact. And by this rehearsal, you impress them upon the only power that can bring them to pass. I once knew a man who confessed that every night before sleep, his last thought was always, "How will I get through next week?" He did not say this aloud. He did not even realize he was saying it. But as he lay in the quiet, the thought would rise like a tide, and he would drift into sleep wrapped in that question. And his weeks continued to arrive in struggle, one after another, without deviation. Not because of fate, not because of economy, but because he was planting the seed of next week's struggle every single night before he slept. Note I take a night. Sleep, you see, is the great doorway into the subconscious. What you impress upon yourself as you fall asleep sinks deeper and faster than any thought you entertain in the noise of the day. That is why the ancients prized the moment of sleep as sacred. The soul is open then. The guard of reason is lowered. The gate is unlatched. And the inner talk spoken at that hour becomes tomorrow's fact. When your last thought of the night is fear, worry, or doubt, you are not merely feeling uneasy. You are praying for the continuation of what you fear. And life answers that prayer without judgment. For life does not judge your request. It only fulfills it. Now imagine the reversal of this. Imagine that instead of drifting into sleep saying, "What if it all collapses?" you drift into sleep saying inwardly, with calm certainty, "Money is with me. It remains with me. I am safe." That single change at the threshold of sleep is enough to redirect the entire current of your days, for you have changed the seed at its source. I once taught a woman who had lived in constant anxiety over her household expenses. By day she managed well. By night she fell apart. The moment the house grew quiet, her thoughts turned dark. She would imagine bills she could not pay, accidents she could not afford, losses she could not recover, and she wondered why her life seemed to echo those imaginations so faithfully. I asked her a very simple question. What are your last words to yourself before you sleep? She had no answer at first. She had never listened, but once she began to notice, she was shocked by the fear she heard. She made one change only. She did not argue with those fears. She did not analyze them. She simply replaced the final sentence of the night with a new one. As she lay down, she would say inwardly, slowly and gently, I am provided for, I am safe, all is well. At first, it felt like a fragile thought floating against a storm, but she persisted, and within weeks, she wrote to me that not only had her anxiety eased, but unexpected financial help had arrived at the very moment she needed it. The outer world had rearranged itself to reflect the new inner sentence. This is why I say to you that your inner talking is not a casual thing. It is the creative act itself. It is the unseen script from which the visible drama is played. You may not remember what you said inwardly yesterday, but your world remembers. Your circumstances remember. Your body remembers, for consciousness never forgets what it accepts. Now consider what most people do when money troubles appear. They talk about them endlessly, not only to others, but to themselves. They rehearse the problem in every detail. They relive it. They justify their fear. They strengthen the very state they wish to escape. And then they wonder why it feels so solid, so immovable. It is solid because they have made it so with their own inner speech. I tell you now with great tenderness, the moment you begin to observe your inner talking without condemnation, you take back your creative power. You no longer live at the mercy of a voice you did not choose. You begin to choose it. And choice is the mark of awakening. Do not think for a moment that this means you must monitor every thought with strain and tension. That would only give birth to a new form of fear. No, what I am teaching you is gentler than that. I am teaching you to become acquainted with yourself, to listen kindly to what is being said within, to notice the tone you live in. Is it resignation? Is it dread? Is it quiet expectation of disappointment? Or is it calm assumption of good? The tone matters even more than the words. Two men may say the same sentence, I will be all right. One may say it with trembling, barely believing it. The other may say it with quiet certainty. The words are identical, the worlds they produce will not be. Money responds not to desperation, but to identity. When you speak inwardly from fear, you speak as one who is waiting to be abandoned. When you speak from calm assurance, you speak as one who expects to be provided for. And money, as a living servant of your assumption, will shape itself to that expectation. I remember a man who came to me saying he had memorized many affirmations. He repeated them every morning with intense emotion, yet nothing seemed to change. When I asked him how he spoke to himself during the rest of the day, especially when plans fell through or payments were delayed, he admitted with great honesty that his inner voice turned harsh and hopeless. I curse my luck, he said. I tell myself it will never work. His morning affirmations were being drowned by his all-day confessions of defeat. The subconscious mind was not confused. It obeyed the stronger feeling, the one repeated with greater sincerity. So I told him to stop fighting and simply redirect. I asked him not to strain to believe new sentences all day. I asked him only to become aware of when the old fearful voice rose, and to answer it gently with a new statement of identity. When the thought came, this will fail, he was to reply inwardly, I am one for whom things work out. Nothing more. No contest. No argument. Just substitution. Within a short time, his outer world began to reflect that shift. Opportunities that had once slipped away, now held. Payments that had been delayed, now arrived. And the change felt natural to him because it grew from a natural change of inner speech. You see now what is happening. You are not being asked to force wealth into existence. You are being shown how to stop forcing poverty into existence. For that is what fearful inner talking has been doing all along. It has been faithfully building the very cage you have been trying to escape. There is no blame here, only liberation. You spoke as one who had been taught to fear. Now you may speak as one who is learning to trust. And trust is not blind hope. Trust is the quiet assumption that the presence you have welcomed remains. From this hour forward, I ask you to become gently aware of what you say about money when no one else is listening. Not with judgment, not with shame, only with interest. Listen as though you were overhearing the conversation of two others. And when you hear fear, do not scold it. Simply introduce a new voice, a steadier voice, a voice that speaks from the identity you are beginning to accept. Let that voice say, money is with me. Let it say, I am safe. Let it say, I am not abandoned. Speak these things inwardly, especially when the old fear tries to rise, not as a battle, as a remembrance. You are remembering who you truly are, for the man or woman who changes their inner speaking changes their life at its root, not gradually, inevitably. The tree cannot bring forth the same fruit once the seed has changed. And now, as this secret begins to unfold in you, you may feel a strange mixture of wonder and responsibility. Wonder, because you see how intimate your power is. Responsibility, because you see you can no longer blame fate so easily. But do not let that responsibility feel heavy. It is not a burden, it is a birthright. You are not meant to live at the mercy of your own unconscious prayers. You are meant to become aware of them and to bless them with new life. This is not self-discipline, it is self-awakening. Observe your inner dialogue tonight, especially as the day quiets and you approach sleep. Listen to the tone you fall asleep in, for that tone is the one that will greet you tomorrow in circumstance. And if you do not like the tone, you now know you can change it, not by force, but by assumption, not by struggle, but by identity. This is the secret doorway, and once you pass through it, you will never again wonder why money behaves the way it does in your life. You will know, and knowing will give you both power and peace. Now we come to a turning point so decisive that once crossed, a man or woman never again relates to life in the same way. This is the moment where the posture of begging dissolves and the posture of authority is born. Until this moment, most have lived as though life were something to appeal to negotiate with, to persuade. And because they believed they must persuade, they placed themselves beneath. They knelt inwardly long before they ever knelt outwardly. They asked and asked again. And because they asked from the feeling of not having, they multiplied the very state they wished to escape. You see, the act of begging is never neutral. It always declares a position. To beg is to confess that the thing asked for is outside of you, separate from you, and possibly unwilling to serve you. To beg is to place power in the thing and powerlessness in yourself. And imagination, which is the only power in the universe, hears that confession and accepts it as law. You may beg humbly, you may beg desperately, you may even beg religiously, but all begging says the same thing. I am not the source, and life answers that prayer with perfect obedience. This is why so many have prayed for money for years and seen nothing change. Their words asked, but their feeling confessed lack. Their lips requested abundance, but their identity remained poor. And identity always wins. You cannot speak as one who has while feeling as one who has not without creating a division within yourself. And a divided house cannot stand. Authority is entirely different. Authority does not plead. It does not reason. It does not argue. It simply assumes. It moves from the quiet certainty of being. When a man speaks with authority, he is not asking whether the thing will obey. He knows it must, not because he is arrogant, not because he is loud, but because he is aligned with the source of all command, which is the I am within him. There is a world of difference between anxiety and authority, though to the untrained mind they may feel equally intense. Anxiety strains outward. Authority rests inward. Anxiety speaks quickly, with urgency and fear. Authority speaks slowly, with calm and finality. Anxiety says, what if it does not come? Authority says, it is done. Anxiety hurries. Authority waits without tension. And money, being spirit clothed in form, knows this distinction better than you do. It cannot be deceived by loud words that do not match the inner state. I once knew a man who prayed loudly every night for financial help. His voice trembled with emotion. His words were dramatic. His faith, by all appearances, seemed great. And yet his life remained in constant struggle. When I spoke with him privately and asked how he truly felt after his prayers ended, he confessed with shame that he usually felt more frightened than before. His prayers were not acts of authority. They were acts of emotional release, born of panic. They strengthened his sense of helplessness instead of dissolving it. Later, that same man learned a very different way. He stopped pleading. He stopped dramatizing his need. Each night, he simply laid down and assumed the feeling of being provided for. He did not ask. He claimed. He did not cry out. He rested in the quiet conviction that his need was already met. Within a short time, his circumstances shifted in ways that astonished him. Why? Because he had changed his position in consciousness. He had moved from servant to source. This is the moment I have been preparing you for without naming it until now. The moment you stop seeing yourself as the one who asks and begin seeing yourself as the one who decides. This is not arrogance. It is not pride. It is obedience to the truth of who you are. For when you say, I am, you are speaking the name of God. And when you accept that name as your own identity, you cannot beg life for what already belongs to you. There is a sentence hidden in Scripture that most never truly hear. Before you ask, I have answered. This is not poetry. It is law. It means that every desire you feel is proof that its fulfillment already exists in consciousness. The hearing comes before the asking. The answering comes before the request. You are never trying to bring something into being. You are simply occupying the state in which it already is. This is why I tell you that the final end of asking is not silence, but command. Not a command spoken in anger or force, but a command spoken in identity. When you say, money is with me now, and you feel it as true, you are not asking money to come. You are recognizing that it already has, and recognition is creation. So what then are these phrases of decree that I tell you will reshape your world? They are not magic formulas. They are not charms. They are not affirmations spoken in hope. They are statements of being, simple, quiet, final. You might say inwardly, I am abundantly supplied, or money follows me naturally. All that I need comes to me easily. These are not wishes. They are identities. They describe who you are now, not who you are trying to become. Speak them without desperation. Speak them as a man describes his own name. You do not shout your name to convince yourself it belongs to you. You simply know it does. And when these statements begin to feel like descriptions rather than demands, you will know you have crossed the threshold from pleading into power. I once taught a woman who had spent years begging circumstance for relief. She prayed constantly for money. She prayed before sleep. She prayed when she woke. She prayed in moments of fear, yet nothing moved. One evening, in deep frustration, she said to me, Neville, I am tired of asking. And I replied gently, then you are ready to receive. I taught her to stop asking entirely. No more requests, no more pleas, only assumption. Each night, she would lie down and feel the quiet dignity of being a woman whose needs were already met. She did not visualize specific sums. She did not imagine particular events. She simply felt the state of being supported by life. Within a surprisingly short time, her circumstances rearranged themselves so naturally that she could hardly point to a single cause. She later said, it felt as though life itself stood up to meet me the moment I stopped kneeling. This is what happens when you abandon the posture of inferiority. The world reflects you as you reflect yourself inwardly. As long as you see yourself as the one who hopes to be chosen, life treats you as optional. When you see yourself as the one who assumes, life treats you as the cause. Here is the moment where many feel a trembling inside. For to move into authority feels dangerous to the old self. The old self says, who do you think you are to speak like that? And the answer is always the same. I am. That is who you are. You are the one in whom every state of life rises and falls. To deny this is to deny the very power by which you are breathing. Authority is not loud, it is quiet. It is not tense, it is relaxed. It is the calmness of one who no longer debates whether he is worthy. For worthiness no longer enters into the conversation. Being itself is enough. Now comes the most important shift of all. The moment you realize that you are not reacting to money, but money is reacting to you. The moment this dawns, even faintly, you are no longer the victim of circumstance, you become the origin of it. And when a man knows he is the origin, he stops begging effects for permission. This is the true end of prayer, as supplication, and the true beginning of prayer, as assumption. You no longer speak to persuade God. You speak as God. You speak as God. You no longer cry out for signs. You become the sign. You no longer hope that life might one day be kind. You assume kindness as your natural environment. And in that moment, perhaps quiet, perhaps unnoticed, perhaps without any dramatic outer sign, the identity of victim dissolves. The old story of struggle begins to lose its authority over you. You may still have obligations to meet. You may still have accounts to consider. But inwardly, you no longer meet them as a beggar. You meet them as the cause. Feel the difference between these two inner sentences. How will I manage? And I always manage. One is the voice of fear searching for support. The other is the voice of identity standing in itself. One waits to be rescued, the other knows it is supplied. And life will answer each one according to its kind. From this hour forward, you are invited to live from decree rather than from demand, from assumption rather than from appeal, from calm authority rather than from trembling hope. And as you do, you will feel a subtle but unmistakable shift in your spine, in your breath, in your sense of being. It is the feeling of one who has stepped out of the crowd and into himself. This is the point where you stop asking money to change and you begin allowing your identity to change. An identity once changed never fails to alter every reflection that stands before it. You are not here to beg life. You are here to express it. You are not here to chase provision. You are here to assume it. And in that assumption, all the machinery of the world will quietly rearrange itself around you without noise, without struggle, without announcement. This is the end of pleading. This is the birth of command. And the moment you accept it inwardly, the old chain of victimhood is already broken. Now that you stand in this new posture of quiet authority, something very tender is ready to take place. Authority without affection can become rigid. Command without warmth can become cold. And the law is not meant to be lived as a battlefield. It is meant to be lived as a harmony. So now we soften the stance of command into the embrace of companionship. We move from ruling money to walking with it, from commanding a servant to welcoming a friend. For money, though it answers authority, remains most faithfully where it feels loved. Not loved in the way men love possessions with grasping hands, but loved as one welcomes a presence into the home. There is a great difference between possession and companionship. Possession clutches, companionship opens. Possession fears loss. Companionship opens. Possession fears loss. Companionship assumes return. And the moment you shift from one to the other, the entire feeling tone of your life begins to change. Imagine now that money is no longer a trembling visitor who might leave at any moment, nor a hard master you must obey, but a guest who feels at ease in your house, a companion who sits beside you without tension, a presence that comes and goes freely, without drama, without fear, without struggle. When you feel money in this way, you no longer tighten when it arrives, and you no longer ache when it departs. You bless it both in coming and in going, knowing that what moves with love always returns with ease. This is why I say to you, bless money at both doors. Bless it when it enters your life, and bless it when it leaves your hand. For whatever you curse as it departs, you chain to loss. And whatever you bless as it departs, you invite to return multiplied. The words need not be spoken aloud. They need only be felt. A silent thank you when you receive. A silent thank you when you give. And gratitude, quiet and steady, becomes the bond that keeps companionship alive. Think of how most pay their bills, with a sigh, with resentment, with fear, with the unspoken thought, there goes my security. That sigh is not harmless. It turns every payment into a small funeral. And if you repeatedly enact the funeral of your money in imagination, You should not be surprised when it behaves like something that dies and does not return. But what if each payment were treated as an act of circulation rather than loss? What if you felt, inwardly, the truth that what moves out in blessing must by law move back in multiplied form? To pay without fear is one of the highest signs of inner wealth. It means you no longer see yourself as one who is being depleted, but as one through whom life is flowing. The pool that fears evaporation becomes stagnant. The spring that trusts its source never runs dry. When you pay in fear, you dam the flow. When you pay in peace, you open it wider. I once knew a woman who dreaded paying anything at all. The act of writing a check filled her with panic. Her hand trembled. Her thoughts raced. She would delay payments as long as possible, not from dishonesty, but from fear. Every bill felt to her like an enemy knocking at the door. I asked her to change one thing only: the inner meaning of the act. Instead of seeing payment as loss, she was to see it as proof that she had first received. Instead of thinking, "This is taking from me," she was to feel, "This is circulating through me." She resisted at first. The habit of dread was strong. But she persisted gently, and in time, she wrote to me with wonder. Not only had her fear of payment vanished, but she noticed that money arrived more easily to match what she gave. The door through which it left had become the same door through which it returned. Now let us speak of receiving without guilt. This is another place where old conditioning hides like a shadow. Many feel unworthy when money arrives. They feel they must justify it. They feel they must apologize for it. They feel it must be balanced with suffering, as though joy must always be paid for with pain. This is not humility. This is inherited unworthiness, and it quietly poisons the well of abundance. To receive without guilt is to acknowledge that you do not have to earn your right to exist. You do not have to suffer in order to be supplied. You do not have to prove your goodness to be supported by life. When money arrives in your hand, whether through labor, gift, or unexpected return, receive it as you would receive sunlight through a window, without explanation, without apology, without fear, simply as something natural. I taught a man once who had been raised to believe that taking money easily was shameful. Even when opportunity arrived, he felt uneasy. Success embarrassed him. Fortune made him restless. And so he found clever ways to lose what he gained without noticing what he was doing. I asked him one question: "Do you believe you are allowed to be supported?" He had no answer. He had never considered it. When he began to accept the simple idea that support was not a crime, his entire relationship with money softened. It no longer had to escape him to keep him comfortable. He was finally at home with it. Friendship with money means you no longer dramatize it. You no longer worship it. You no longer despise it. You simply live with it as one lives with a companion whose presence is neither shocking nor uncertain. You speak to it kindly. You thank it silently. You trust its movements, and you trust yourself to remain provided for, with or without a particular sum in your hand at any given moment. There is a great peace that comes when you stop looking at your account as though it were the judge of your worth. Numbers rise, numbers fall, but your identity remains. And when your identity remains anchored in I am, the fluctuations of outer form lose their terror. I remember a man who came to me after years of deep conflict with money. He told me he no longer feared it as he once did, but he still did not feel at ease with it. It felt like a truce rather than a friendship. I told him to begin treating money as a companion in small, ordinary gestures, to greet it when it arrived, to bless it when it left, to stop dramatizing the middle. Within months, he said something remarkable. "I no longer think about money the way I used to. It is just there, quietly, faithfully." And because it was quiet in consciousness, it had become steady in form. This is what reconciliation feels like. It is not fireworks. It is not emotional frenzy. It is calm. It is ease. It is the sense that the old war is over. And when the war within ends, the war without cannot continue. Here is the great truth. Money will always behave toward you the way you feel toward it. Not the way you pretend to feel, not the way you say you feel, but the way you actually feel in the stillness of your own being. And when you allow affection to replace fear, money will replace its nervous coming and going with a gentle staying. Now feel the difference between these two states within yourself. In one, you watch money anxiously, measuring, guarding, bracing for loss. In the other, you move through your days with the quiet assumption that you are supported. One state tightens the chest. The other opens the breath. One shrinks the world. The other lets it expand. You are not being asked to love money as an idol. You are being asked to remove the poison of fear and let the natural warmth of wholeness return. For when fear leaves, affection does not rush in with noise. It arrives softly, and in that softness, all things rest. From now on, when money enters your life, let your inner voice say, welcome. When money leaves your life, let your inner voice say, return, not as a command, as a blessing. For what is blessed always seeks its source. This is how you make the process sustainable, not by constant effort, not by constant vigilance, but by constant ease. The moment abundance feels like work, the old pattern is trying to return. The moment it feels like companionship, the new pattern has taken root. You are no longer wrestling with supply. You are no longer pleading for provision. You are no longer standing in opposition to money. You are walking with it, and two who walk together by law arrive together. Let this reconcile itself in you now. Let the old tension soften. Let the old resentment melt. Let the old dread dissolve. In its place, let there be a simple human feeling of comfort with the idea of being supported. You do not need to force it. Comfort cannot be forced. It is allowed. And the moment you allow it, the outer world will begin, gently and inevitably, to reflect it back to you. Now we arrive at the very heart of the mystery. Everything you have heard up to this point prepares you for this single truth, simple in its words, yet immeasurable in its power. Feeling is the secret. Without feeling, words are empty shells. Without feeling, imagination is a motionless picture. Without feeling, all techniques collapse into effort and strain. But when feeling awakens, even the smallest assumption becomes a seed that must grow. You may repeat the most beautiful sentences about wealth 1,000 times, and nothing will change if your body still trembles with fear and your breath still tightens with doubt. For the subconscious does not hear the sentences you recite. It receives only the state you occupy. And the state is not a thought. A state is a feeling of being. There is a vast difference between saying, I am wealthy, and feeling yourself to be a person to whom wealth is natural. One is repetition, the other is creation. One is sound, the other is substance. One remains on the lips, the other sinks into the body and becomes your atmosphere. I have seen this again and again. Men and women come to me saying, Neville, I affirm every day, and I ask, and how do you feel? At first, they do not understand the question. They tell me the words again, and I say, no, you have told me what you say. I ask you how you feel when you say it. And then the truth begins to surface. They admit they feel tense. They feel uncertain. They feel as though they are trying to convince themselves. And in that trying is the confession that they do not yet believe. Feeling is not effort. Feeling is acceptance. When you feel something to be true, you stop trying to make it true. You rest in it, you move in it, you breathe in it, you become it. And what you become in consciousness must, by law, express itself in form. Now let me show you how to feel wealth. Now not as a future hope, but as a present state. Do not imagine that this requires excitement or emotional frenzy. The feeling of wealth is not wild joy. It is quiet sufficiency. It is steady ease. It is the absence of inner pressure around survival. Close your eyes for a moment, wherever you are, and imagine that every bill you owe is already paid. Do not try to see the money. Instead, notice what happens in your body when that is true. Do your shoulders drop? Does your breathing become slower? Does your chest feel lighter? That relaxation is the feeling of provision. That is the state you are after. The body always tells the truth before the mind agrees. Now imagine that you no longer need to check and recheck, no longer brace for sudden loss, no longer prepare excuses in advance for why you cannot afford this or that. Imagine that the question of can I has been replaced by the quiet knowing of course. Again, do not picture scenes yet. Simply notice the shift in the body, the softening, the calm, the ease. That is the feeling of abundance beginning to take form. Creation does not begin with images. It begins with atmosphere. When the atmosphere within you changes, images naturally follow. But if you chase images, without changing the atmosphere, they remain fantasies. This is why I say that imagination must be wedded to feeling. Imagination without feeling is daydream. Feeling without imagination is vague emotion. But when the two unite, creation is born. Now we speak of rehearsal. The inner rehearsal is not pretending. In the childish sense, it is not play acting with effort. It is entering a state so fully that the body accepts it as real. Just as an actor does not convince himself logically that he is a king, but enters the feeling tone of royalty and lets the body move from that place, so you enter the feeling of wealth and let the body, the breath, and the posture follow. When you rehearse inwardly, do not multiply scenes. A single simple act is enough if it is felt as real. You might imagine handing over money with ease and feeling no sting. You might imagine opening a letter and feeling relief instead of dread. You might imagine telling someone quietly and naturally, everything is taken care of now. And as you imagine it, feel not the excitement of surprise, but the calm of normality. That calm is the proof that the state is accepted. The subconscious does not respond to what is dramatic. It responds to what feels natural, and what feels natural eventually becomes factual. Now let us speak of the body, for the body is the faithful servant of feeling. The state of wealth is not only a thought, it is a posture. It is a manner of breathing. It is a way of carrying yourself. When a man feels poor within, his body tightens. His breath becomes shallow. His movements become guarded. When a man feels supplied within, his body loosens. His breath deepens. His movements become unhurried. You cannot lie to your body. It always expresses the state you actually occupy. Therefore, one of the simplest ways to enter the feeling of abundance is to relax deliberately. Sit or lie down. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw loosen. Let the breath slow. And as the body relaxes, whisper inwardly, not as an affirmation but as a description, I am at ease. I am safe. I am supported. And then allow the body to respond as though that were true. For the body understands truth before the reasoning mind does. You will notice something remarkable if you persist. The moment you relax into the feeling of support, the mind may try to argue. It may parade old fears, old numbers, old facts. Do not fight them. Fighting tightens the state you wish to leave. Simply remain in the feeling of ease. The body will teach the mind by example. This is the art of becoming rather than trying. You are not shifting money. You are shifting yourself. And money will follow without effort, as shadow follows form. I once taught a man who struggled deeply with this idea. At first, he was attached to effort. He believed that without struggle, nothing could be gained. When I instructed him to relax into abundance, he felt guilty. He felt as though he were cheating life. But he obeyed, tentatively. Each night, he would lie in bed, relax his body, and feel what it would be like to have no financial pressure at all. At first, the feeling lasted only seconds before fear rushed back. But night after night, those seconds grew longer. And then one day, without warning, a new opportunity arose that lifted his entire condition. He said to me later, it felt as though life met me where I finally stopped pushing against it. This is a profound mystery. Strain belongs to the old state. Ease belongs to the new. You cannot force yourself into abundance. You must allow yourself into it. And allowance always feels like relaxation. Now let us return to desire. Desire is not the enemy. Desire is the proof that a state is ready to be occupied. You would not desire wealth if the feeling of wealth were not already possible for you. But desire becomes suffering when it is kept at a distance. When you say, one day I will feel secure, you stretch the state into the future and remain separated from it. The secret is to feel now what you once promised yourself you would feel later. This is how desire becomes fulfillment. The moment you experience it in consciousness, even faintly, you have already entered the state. The world will take care of the rest. Let me tell you something very important. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are, and you become what you feel yourself to be. Therefore, the only real work is to feel differently about yourself. Do not ask, how can I get more money? Ask instead, what would I feel like if my life were already supplied? And then feel that now, not all at once, not perfectly, but sincerely, even if it lasts for a minute. That minute is more powerful than years of wishing. Feeling is creative. It is the womb of all form, and once you begin to live from it, the world will rearrange itself to match it with astonishing speed and precision. Tonight, when you lie down to sleep, do not repeat phrases with effort. Enter a state. Feel yourself being someone to whom money is no longer a problem. Let the body soften into that truth. Let the breath slow into that truth. Let the heart rest in that truth. Let the heart rest in that truth and drift into sleep, carrying that feeling as your final atmosphere. For what you fall asleep feeling, you awaken experiencing. You are not waiting for a future to feel free. You are learning to feel free now, and that is the true alchemy. Now that you have learned to feel, to relax into the state, to let the body accept abundance as natural, we move into something even more subtle and even more powerful. We move into what I call the atmosphere of your life. For a state does not live only in moments of imagination. A true state becomes the air you breathe inwardly. It becomes the climate of your days. It becomes the quiet background, music behind every thought and every action. Many men and women experience moments of wealth in imagination, moments of security, moments of freedom. They enter the feeling at night or in quiet contemplation, and for a while they taste it. But then they rise and return to their old atmosphere of tension. And because atmosphere surrounds all moments, it slowly dissolves those brief experiences like fog dissolves a shape. What must change is not only what you feel at special times, but what you live in at all times. To live as if money never leaves you is not arrogance. It is not denial. It is recognition. It is the same recognition with which you live with your own breath. You do not wonder each morning whether your breath will stay with you through the day. You do not anxiously monitor it, fearing it might vanish. You simply follow it without thinking. That is how money must become in your inner world. Not a visitor whose absence you monitor, but a presence so natural you no longer question its loyalty. Think of your shadow. Wherever you go, it follows. When you walk, it walks. When you stop, it stops. You do not chase it. You do not call it. You do not hope it will appear. You simply move, and it moves with you. This is how you must come to think of money, not as something that comes and goes at random, but as the shadow cast by the state you occupy. When you move in consciousness as one who is supported, money moves with you as its shadow. Now imagine carrying this awareness into your home. You sit at your table, and inwardly you feel that supply sits there with you. You lie down at night, and inwardly you feel that supply rests under your roof. You rise in the morning, and inwardly you feel that supply rises with you. This is not visualization in the strained sense. It is simple awareness. It is the feeling of not being alone with your needs. When you leave your house and walk along the street, do not imagine that you are stepping into the world alone. Feel instead that provision walks beside you, not as a sack you carry on your back, but as a quiet companion at your side. The moment you feel that, even faintly, your posture changes. Your steps become easier. Your gaze lifts. The world feels less hostile, and the world always reflects the way it is perceived. When you lie down to sleep, let the last feeling in your body be the feeling of being supported. Not supported by a person, not supported by an institution, but supported by life itself. Let your final impression be one of quiet sufficiency, for sleep seals the atmosphere of the coming day. What you fall asleep in, you rise into. This atmosphere is not made by dramatic acts. It is made by quiet consistency. It is made by the way you respond to small things, by the way you inwardly react when you spend, by the way you inwardly respond when you receive, by the way you inwardly comment on the flow of your day. These small reactions are the brushstrokes with which you paint your inner climate. If each time you spend, you feel a small tightening and think, I am losing, you are cooling the atmosphere. If each time you receive, you feel surprised or unworthy, you are stirring instability into the climate. But if each time you spend, you feel the ease of circulation, and each time you receive, you feel the calm of normality, you are stabilizing the atmosphere of abundance. Little by little, stability is the true sign of wealth. Not excitement, not sudden elation, not dramatic announcements, but stability. The feeling that life is not carrying you on a razor's edge, The feeling that you are not one expense away from disaster. The feeling that you are held. This is why I tell you that the goal is not merely to have more, but to feel held more deeply. For when you feel held, the having takes care of itself. Your inner atmosphere will always recreate itself in outer circumstance. If the atmosphere is one of emergency, life will mirror emergencies. If the atmosphere is one of sufficiency, life will mirror sufficiency. If the atmosphere is one of fear, life will mirror danger. If the atmosphere is one of trust, life will mirror support. Now do not make the mistake of trying to force this atmosphere by constant mental effort. Atmosphere is not made by pressure. It is made by familiarity. A room does not feel warm because someone shouts at the fireplace. It feels warm because the fire has been burning long enough for the walls themselves to absorb the heat. So it is with your inner climate. Return again and again to the feeling of support, not tensely, not desperately, but familiarly. And in time, it will no longer be something you visit. It will be something you inhabit. I once knew a merchant who said to me, "Neville, I no longer think about money with fear, but sometimes I still feel cautious." I asked him, "Do you feel cautious about your own name?" He laughed and said no. I said, "Then that is the difference between visiting a state and living in it. When wealth becomes as familiar to you as your own name, caution will dissolve on its own. This inner climate must become so steady that outer events cannot shake it. When a bill arrives, the old state would react with alarm. The new atmosphere remains calm. When an unexpected expense appears, the old state would panic. The new atmosphere responds with quiet confidence, not by denying the fact, but by denying its power to define your identity. The atmosphere does not say, "This should not have happened." It says, "I am still supported." And because it says that from the depth of feeling, life must rearrange itself to agree. You must understand this clearly. Outer circumstances are weather. Inner atmosphere is climate. Weather changes daily. Climate shapes the land over time. You may have an outer day of difficulty and remain inwardly at peace. You may have an outer delay and remain inwardly at ease. But if your inner climate remains stable, the weather cannot alter your destiny. The tragedy of most lives is not that storms come. Storms come to all. The tragedy is that most men and women change their climate every time the weather shifts. And by doing so, they remain forever at the mercy of appearances. Now you are being taught to remain inwardly settled even when appearances vary. This is the sign of mastery. Not control over events, but command over self. Here is a quiet test you may use. Ask yourself in an unguarded moment, do I secretly expect money to leave me? Not as a dramatic fear, not as a conscious belief, but as a quiet assumption. If the answer is yes, then your atmosphere is still unstable. And that is not a failure. It is simply information. For what is seen can be changed. If, on the other hand, you find that the thought of money leaving you no longer stirs a deep fear, that you quietly expect return even when you give, then your climate is already shifting. You are not asked to feel invincible. You are asked to feel held. This climate must extend into every part of life, in your work, in your rest, in your giving, in your receiving. Not as a strained vigilance, but as a quiet background assumption. The background assumption is the one that shapes everything, because it is the one you no longer argue with. And the day will come when you realize something remarkable. You will realize that you no longer practice abundance. You live it. You no longer try to feel supported. You are supported. You no longer remember to trust. You trust by default. This is the moment when a practice becomes a way of being. From that moment on, money will cease to be a problem to solve. It will become a resource that flows through your life as naturally as breath flows through your chest. You will still make choices. You will still plan. You will still act, but you will no longer act from survival. You will act from steadiness. And steadiness is magnetic. People will not be able to name what they feel around you, but they will feel something. A calm, a confidence, a sense that things somehow work around you, that doors open, that help appears, that timing is kind, and they will call it luck. But you will know it as climate. This is why I tell you that the final transformation is not in your bank account first. It is in your atmosphere. Change that, and the rest must follow. Live now as one with whom money walks, not noisily, not dramatically, but quietly, faithfully, as a constant presence. Go to sleep with that presence. Wake with that presence. Walk with that presence. Sit with that presence. And without effort, without force, without strain, the outer world will one day look back at you and quietly confirm what you have already been living within. Now we move into a depth of practice that few ever touch, though it has always been hidden in plain sight. Up to now, you have spoken to money. You have changed your feeling toward it. You have shifted your posture from fear to authority, from resistance to friendship, and that alone is enough to transform a life. But now, I take you to the place where imagination ceases to be a tool and becomes a living communion. For visualization, in its highest sense, is not looking at pictures. It is entering into dialogue. Men think they visualize when they see piles of coins or numbers on a page, but that is not visualization in the sense I speak of. That is only imagery. True visualization is encounter. It is relationship. It is when imagination becomes a living exchange between you and that which you would bring into form. You have already begun to accept that money is not dead. Now I ask you to dare the next step, to hear it answer you. At first, this sounds strange to the disciplined mind. Hear money speak, it says. And yet, all through Scripture, beings speak that the world calls inanimate. The earth speaks. The blood cries out. Wisdom speaks. Even stones are said to cry aloud. Why would money alone be mute? It is mute only to the one who insists it is dead. Now listen carefully. When I say hear money speak, I do not mean with physical ears. I mean with the same inner hearing by which you hear your own thoughts. You already hear voices inwardly all day long. You hear fear speak. You hear doubt speak. You hear memory speak. You hear hope speak. That same inner faculty can hear reassurance, confirmation, and promise when a new state is accepted. Here is how this communion begins, simply and naturally. At some quiet moment, preferably at night, when the senses are soft and the outer world is hushed, you imagine money not as an object, but as a presence before you. Not a form you strain to see, but a presence you allow to be felt. And then you speak to it quietly, inwardly, as you would speak to a trusted companion. You might say, "You are with me," or "You are faithful to me," or "You take care of me." And then you pause. In that pause, do not force an answer. Do not invent one nervously. Simply remain open. And what will often arise is not a sound, but a knowing, a calm assurance, a response in feeling, a sudden sense of yes. And that yes, though silent, is the voice of money answered in consciousness. Over time, this becomes clearer. A man once wrote to me, saying that after weeks of this practice, he began to feel as though money was speaking back to him in his own inner language. When he feared, he would suddenly feel a quiet reassurance rise unbidden within him. When he doubted, a steady sense of promise would replace it. And as this inner dialogue became real, his outer world followed in perfect step. Another woman came to me overwhelmed with debt. Each letter that arrived at her door filled her with dread. I instructed her to stop opening the letters for a time, and instead to go nightly into communion with the presence she called money. At first, all she could feel was fear, but she persisted. And one night, without strain, she felt a calm inner assurance, as though someone had said to her, "It is handled." Not in words she heard with her ears, but in a felt conviction so deep that she fell asleep in peace. Within weeks, arrangements formed that no human planning could have devised. Debts were reduced. Payments were rearranged. Unexpected help arrived. The outer world had echoed the inner voice she had finally allowed herself to hear. This is not superstition. This is the mechanics of consciousness. For imagination is not a one-way mirror. It is a two-way door. What you affirm, it reflects. What you allow, it confirms. And when you treat money as a speaking presence, rather than a silent thing, you lift the entire practice into a living exchange. Let me show you how this works in its simplest form. You imagine a moment that would only be possible if abundance were already true, not dozens of details. One simple scene, a letter in your hand that feels relieving instead of frightening. A conversation in which you hear yourself say, Everything has worked out. A simple act of paying with ease and not looking back. And as you imagine it, you do not only see yourself acting, you feel the response of the invisible world to your action. You feel the confirmation. You feel the agreement. You feel the quiet yes beneath the scene. That feeling of agreement is the response of money in consciousness. This is why I tell you that imagination is not pretending. It is rehearsing reality before it appears. And what is rehearsed with feeling must later be performed in fact. I remember a man who owed a great sum. He saw no way to repay. Every sensible calculation told him he was trapped for years. I did not argue with his figures. I did not deny the arithmetic. I simply asked him to enter into a short nightly dialogue. Each night, he imagined opening a letter and hearing within himself the words, "Your balance is cleared." He felt the shock, then the relief, then the quiet gratitude. He let that sequence play until it felt real, and each night something remarkable happened. The dread that had haunted him all day softened. A strange confidence took its place. Within 3 months, through a series of events no mind could have designed, the debt was settled. Some was forgiven. Some was paid through unexpected channels. The letter he had heard within finally appeared in outer form. He did not receive what he wished for. He received what he had already accepted as done. You must understand this deeply. The inner world must always move first. The outer world follows as echo, as reflection, as shadow. There are countless tales of letters that appeared after months of imagined correspondence, of calls that came after weeks of inner hearing, of payments that arrived after nights of felt agreement. But these are not marvels to be collected as stories. They are illustrations of a law that works exactly the same way every time. The invisible always precedes the visible. The conversation always precedes the event. What you are learning now is not to talk at money, but to converse with it. Not to shout into a void, but to enter into communion with a living presence. And communion changes the heart in ways command alone never could. When you allow yourself to sense money as something that answers you, you are no longer lonely in your desire. You are no longer pushing against silence. You are walking in dialogue with the unseen. And the unseen is the only place where true creation occurs. This practice does something very important to the soul. It dissolves the feeling of being abandoned in the world. It replaces isolation with partnership. You no longer feel that you are crying into an empty sky. You feel that you are heard. And when a man feels heard in consciousness, he stops shouting in life. You may find at first that your imagined dialogue feels awkward. That is only because you are learning a new language. Do not judge it. Do not test it. Do not demand proof. Simply continue the conversation softly, naturally, as though it were already established. Because in truth, it always has been. You are simply becoming aware of it now. You will also notice that as this communion deepens, a very curious thing begins to happen. You will find that outer help arrives before you even think to ask for it. A door opens without your pushing. A voice speaks before you call. Money seems to anticipate your need rather than respond late to your panic. This is the sign that your inner dialogue has become stable. You are no longer chasing response. You are living in response. Mysticism is not the abandonment of the world. It is the discovery of its invisible engine. And that engine is imagination in living communion with itself. When you speak to money now, do not speak as one testing a theory. Speak as one continuing a relationship. When you listen now, do not strain for signs. Listen with the quiet expectancy of one who knows that response is natural. And above all, let your imagined dialogues never be dramatic rehearsals of need. Let them always be quiet, confirmations of sufficiency. Let money speak to you words of steadiness, not promises of wild miracle. For the subconscious accepts the normal far more readily than the spectacular. If you hear inwardly, "I am with you," believe it. If you feel inwardly, you are provided for. Accept it. If you sense inwardly, it is already arranged. Rest in it. For these inner statements, once accepted, become outer facts in their appointed hour. This is the highest form of visualization, not seeing things, but communing with that which brings things into being. And when you live this way, you will no longer marvel at sudden payments, surprising letters, unexpected calls. You will recognize them as echoes. You will say quietly, Yes, I heard this before. You are not summoning money from the outside. You are allowing it to answer from the inside. And the inside is always first. Let this practice lift you now from technique into communion, from effort into relationship, from wishing into knowing. And as it does, you will find that the world listens more closely than you ever imagined. Now we must turn our attention to the one force that has undone more prayers, scattered more fortunes, and broken more inner promises than any other power on earth. That force is fear. Fear is not merely an emotion that troubles the heart. It is not merely a reaction to circumstances. Fear is a state of consciousness, and because it is a state, it creates with the same certainty as faith. Fear is creative. That is why it is so dangerous when it is unconscious. You have already learned that the inner conversation is prayer. Now you must learn that fear is nothing more than prayer made in reverse. It is the same power turned against itself. When you fear, you are not being passive. You are actively imagining loss, lack, abandonment, and danger. You are feeling those things as real before they appear. And feeling is the womb of creation. Therefore, fear is not harmless. It is formative. Most men believe fear is simply something that happens to them. They say, I cannot help it. I am afraid. But I tell you, fear is something you enter, something you occupy, something you agree to inwardly. And the moment you agree with it, it begins to shape the world around you in its own image. You see this everywhere. A man fears he will lose what he has, and soon he does. A woman fears she will not be able to cope, and circumstance arrives to test her. A family fears the future, and the future answers with uncertainty. Not because life is cruel, but because life is obedient. It takes the shape of what is believed. Fear is the great expeller of money, because fear always assumes separation. Fear says, I am not safe. Fear says, supply can leave me. Fear says, I am one mistake away from disaster. And when a man or woman lives in that assumption long enough, money must behave as something that comes and goes unpredictably. For money is only the shadow of the inner state. Panic is fear made loud. Panic is the moment when fear floods the body and overwhelms the mind. And panic is especially destructive, because it compresses imagination into a single violent image. Loss now, when a person panics about money, their entire being imagines scarcity with great intensity. And because intensity multiplies impression, panic can undo in minutes what months of quiet assumption had begun to build. This is why I tell you that emotional stability is not merely desirable. It is magnetic. Stability is the soil in which wealth grows roots. Instability shakes those roots loose. You must understand this clearly. Money does not flee from you because you lack skill. It flees from you because it mirrors your inner insecurity. Money cannot cling to a consciousness that expects abandonment. It must reflect the expectation of departure. There was a man who came to me after receiving a large sum through an inheritance. For the first time in his life, he had more than enough. But from the very day it arrived, he was afraid. Afraid someone would cheat him. Afraid the money would vanish. Afraid he would make a mistake. Afraid it would not last. Within a year, through a chain of fearful decisions, rushed choices, and suspicious reactions, the money was gone. He said to me, it is as if it was cursed. And I replied, gently, it was feared. He had never felt himself safe with money. And so the state of fear that lived in him shaped every action he took. Fear always justifies itself afterward by pointing to the wreckage it creates. But the wreckage was never the cause, it was the effect. Fear is not conquered by force. You cannot wrestle fear to the ground. The more you fight it, the more real you make it. Fear is neutralized only by a deeper assumption, safety. You must not try to destroy fear. You must starve it by withdrawing the feeling that gives it life. Safety is not something that comes from outer protection. For no amount of money, no contract, no promise from others can remove fear, if fear is your inner climate. Many who have much are terrified of losing it. Many who have little feel secure. The difference is not in circumstance. The difference is in assumption. Safety is an inner decision. It is the quiet acceptance of the idea, I am supported by life itself. And when that idea becomes natural to you, fear no longer has soil in which to grow. It may knock, but it will find no door to enter. You do not neutralize fear by arguing with it logically. Logic belongs to the surface mind. Fear lives deeper. You neutralize fear by returning again and again to the feeling of being held. You do it not with force, but with remembrance. When fear arises, and it will try, you are not asked to conquer it heroically. You are simply asked not to follow it. You are asked not to continue the story it begins to tell. Fear always tells the same story: disaster, loss, abandonment, humiliation. The characters change, the scenes shift, but the plot never does. The moment you recognize the story, you can choose to step out of it. When the thought arises, what if this all collapses? Do not answer it with reassurance spoken in panic. Answer it with a return to your inner posture of safety. Relax your breath. Loosen your body. Feel again the quiet sufficiency you have already practiced. And let the fearful image die of neglect. The conscious mind believes that fear must be resolved with action. The deeper truth is that fear dissolves when the state beneath it changes. And that change is always a change in feeling, never merely a change in words. Let me tell you of a woman who struggled with intense financial fear, even after she had begun to experience results from this teaching. Money would come to her, but every time she received it, her terror of losing it increased. She said to me, "Neville, I feel like I am standing on glass." I asked her a simple question: "Where do you feel safe?" She could not answer. She had never associated herself with the feeling of safety, apart from outer guarantees. I told her to forget money entirely for a season, and to focus only on one thing: the feeling of being held by life, not held by a bank, not held by a person, held by existence itself. Each night, she was to feel herself sinking into a great invisible support, as though the earth itself were carrying her without effort. She practiced this for weeks, and something extraordinary happened. Her fear began to fade, and as it faded, the money that had felt unstable before became steady. Nothing had changed outwardly at first, but inwardly she had moved from standing on glass to standing on rock. This is the emotional stability that becomes a magnet. Money cannot stabilize in a field of panic. It cannot settle in a climate of dread, but it rests naturally where calm abides. You must no longer confuse excitement with faith. Excitement often belongs to fear wearing a bright mask. True faith is quiet. It does not tremble. It does not rush. It does not demand proof. It rests. The moment you notice that your heart is racing around money, you know fear has entered the conversation. And the moment you notice it, you have already regained your power. For what is unconscious rules you. What is conscious serves you. There is no need to condemn yourself for fear. Every human being passes through it. Fear is part of the dream of separation. But you are awakening now from that dream. And as you awaken, fear loses its authority. Your task is not to make fear disappear forever overnight. Your task is to stop letting fear define your identity. You are not your fear. You are the awareness that notices it, and what you notice without merging with loses power. When you feel fear rise, do not ask, "Why am I afraid?" That question often leads deeper into the story. Ask instead, "What must I feel to return to my natural state of safety?" And then do something very simple. Breathe. Relax your shoulders, let your jaw loosen, and silently return to one gentle truth. I am supported, not as a sentence to convince yourself, as a state to re-enter. Every time you return to safety, you weaken the habit of fear. Every time you give fear your attention and your imagination, you strengthen it. You are training either one or the other at every moment. There is no neutral ground in feeling. I want you to understand how deeply emotional stability magnetizes life. When you are calm, others become calm around you. When you are steady, opportunities become steady around you. When you are at peace, life arranges itself with less friction. This is not psychology. This is law. Money is not attracted to desperation. It is attracted to grounding. It is not drawn to panic. It is drawn to poise. It is not moved by hysteria. It is guided by certainty. Once you learn to remain internally steady, even when numbers fluctuate, even when timing delays, even when appearances challenge, you have mastered the one gate through which wealth must pass. For wealth is not merely an amount. It is a way of being. Now feel this truth quietly. The moment you do not need money to stop being afraid, money begins to feel safe staying with you. The moment you stop using money as your emotional shield, it ceases to flee from your emotional storms. The moment you stop panicking over supply, supply finds rest in you. This is the paradox that few understand. Those who clutch hardest lose fastest. Those who breathe easiest receive most steadily. You are being trained now not only to imagine differently, but to feel differently in the presence of uncertainty. You are learning to hold your inner center, even when the outer waves move. And this alone will carry you further than any technique ever could. Fear expels money, because fear is the belief in separation from life. Safety retains money because safety is the belief in unity with life. And unity is the true source of all supply. Let fear pass through your awareness without making a home in it. Let safety become your new dwelling place. And from that place, money will no longer behave like a frightened bird. It will behave like something that has finally found a place to rest. There comes a point in every transformation where the old self begins to resist its own disappearance. At first, the new assumptions feel fragile, almost like borrowed clothing. You speak new words, you feel new states, you imagine new ends, yet the old voice still whispers, "This isn't you. This is pretend. This is fragile." And it is precisely here that most abandon the work, not because it is false, but because it has not yet become natural. When I say persist, I do not mean strain. I do not mean forcing smiles over fear or chanting words in desperation. I mean returning again and again to the chosen state, with quiet refusal to identify with the old one. You will feel at times as though you are acting a part that is not yet yours. That is because it is not yet yours in habit, but it is yours in seed. And every seed feels unreal until the day it breaks the soil and calls itself a tree. The old identity does not die loudly. It does not collapse in a dramatic moment. It fades, it weakens, it loses its authority little by little as you stop feeding it with attention and feeling. The new identity strengthens in the same way. At first, you feel wealthy for moments, then for hours, then some days, and then one quiet morning you wake and realize you did not think about lack at all. It simply did not occur to you. And in that moment, the transformation has already happened inwardly, even if the outer picture has not yet fully caught up. There is always a moment in this process where it feels false. This is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of transition. The soul is passing from one garment to another. The old still clings, while the new is not yet fully worn. And in that interval, everything feels uncertain. That is the narrow bridge. That is the place where the work is sealed. I recall a man who practiced imagining wealth for many months, while his outer world grew worse. Bells increased. Opportunities seemed to close. Discouragement pressed heavily upon him, and yet something within him had already changed. He told me, "Neville, I feel like a wealthy man, trapped in a poor man's world." I smiled and said, "Then the change is already done. You are simply waiting for your shadow to catch up." He persisted, not with excitement, not with constant affirmations, with simple loyalty to the feeling he had tasted. And one day, quietly, without drama, his life restructured itself. A business connection he had almost forgotten bore fruit. A chain of events unfolded that placed him on an entirely new footing. And when that happened, he told me, it did not feel like becoming wealthy. It felt like being recognized as what I already was. This is the moment when effort drops away. Until then, there is practice. After then, there is being. You do not persist forever. You persist only until the state becomes natural. And when it becomes natural, you no longer have to remind yourself. You no longer have to guard it. It expresses itself as easily as breathing. Transformation is not dramatic. It is subtle. The old man dies not with a scream, but with a yawn. One day, you simply do not return to him. You do not consult him. You do not identify with him. And in that quiet forgetting, he disappears. Now let me speak to you of the strange and wonderful movement by which the invisible state becomes visible in your world. Men call it coincidence. I call it the bridge of incidence. You are not required to build this bridge. You are required only to stand at the end and remain there in feeling. The bridge forms beneath your feet as you walk. When the inner state changes, the outer world must rearrange itself to reflect it. But it never does so in straight lines. It does not move by logic. It moves by necessity of expression. People enter your life without apparent reason. Conversations occur that seem casual but later prove decisive. Chances appear that you would never have imagined or sought. And when you look back, you see that every step was necessary, that nothing was accidental. The money does not travel in a straight visible line from desire to hand. It travels through the consciousness of others, through opportunities, through remembered names, through forgotten connections, through legal arrangements, through favors that seem small at first, through doors that open because someone, somewhere, felt inclined to act without knowing why. I have seen wallets lost and returned against all odds. I have seen inheritances appear where none were expected. I have seen opportunities arise through people who once refused to help. I have seen debts vanish through circumstances no man could have planned. And in every case, the inner assumption had been fixed long before the outer path became visible. This is why I tell you with certainty, you are never required to know how it will happen. The moment you become anxious about the path, you have shifted your attention from the end to the means, and the means is not your concern. The end is your dominion. When the money moves toward you, it will often move through what once looked like an obstacle. A mistake becomes the doorway. A loss becomes the opening. A delay becomes the protection. A rejection becomes the redirection. And later you will say, if that had not happened, this could never have happened. Life is not opposing you. Life is arranging itself through ways that the surface mind cannot anticipate. That is the nature of the bridge. Do not grow restless when you cannot yet see the path. You are not meant to see it. If you could see it, you would interfere with it. Your vision is reserved for the end. The path belongs to the deeper intelligence of imagination. Now let me show you one of the most decisive disciplines in this entire work. The discipline of not bowing to appearances. The world you see is always the past. It is yesterday's belief walking around in physical clothes. And if you react to it as though it were the present truth, you give yesterday power over tomorrow. Men look at numbers and say, this is my reality. They look at bills and say, this is what is true. They look at shortages and say, this defines me. And in doing so, they seal yesterday into tomorrow. The visible world is not the cause. It is the effect. And an effect has no creative power. You must never let an effect dictate a new cause. When lack appears, say within yourself, this is old news. When numbers contradict your assumption, say this is the echo of who I used to be. When fear tries to argue using facts, say these facts belong to an old state that no longer rules me. You do not fight what you see. You simply refuse to accept it as final. You let it pass like a shadow on a wall, while you stand in the light that casts the new shadow. There will be days when the outer world will try to persuade you that nothing has changed. On those days, your task is not to become emotional. It is to become faithful. Faith is not excitement. Faith is loyalty to the unseen. If you react to scarcity with panic, you revive scarcity as a cause. If you react to delay with despair, you authorize delay as law. But if you remain inwardly steady while appearances fluctuate, you withdraw their authority completely. The end state is not something you visit occasionally. It is something you abide in. And abiding means you no longer look to the world to tell you who you are. You look to the world to show you what you have already assumed. There is no power in numbers. There is no power in documents. There is no power in circumstances. All power resides in feeling. All power resides in assumption. All power resides in identity. When you hold the end quietly while the world rearranges itself noisily, you are exercising the highest form of dominion. You are no longer pushed and pulled by events. You allow events to align. You will know this stage has been reached when you stop reacting. You still notice, you still act when action is required. But you no longer tremble. You no longer attach your worth to the moment. You no longer interpret every fluctuation as a message about your future. And from that place of calm refusal to be hypnotized by the surface, the bridge of incidents unfolds rapidly and with elegance. What once took years now takes months. What once took months now takes weeks. For you are no longer rebuilding after emotional collapse. You are building from within stability. This is the armor of the unseen. This is how faith becomes untouchable. And this is how the end you have chosen becomes inevitable. When the inner state is fixed and no longer wavers, something begins to happen that no effort on your part could ever accomplish. Life itself begins to rearrange, not slowly, not with strain, but with an intelligence so quiet and precise that when you look back, you will hardly believe what has taken place. This is what men call providence, and because it often moves in ways the surface mind would never choose, I have called it strange providence. You do not summon this movement, you do not direct it, you simply enter the state, remain faithful to it, and then you watch as the world bends without noise. People you did not think of suddenly think of you. Doors you never knocked upon swing open. Paths you never considered appear as though they had always been waiting. And what makes providence seem strange is not its cruelty, but its perfection. It almost never comes through the channel you predicted. It arrives sideways. It comes through delay that turns into rescue, through a loss that reveals a greater gain, through a rejection that quietly redirects your feet to the only path that could have fulfilled the desire. I have seen men imagine promotion and receive inheritance. I have seen women imagine security and receive opportunity instead. I have seen those who expected money from one person receive it from a dozen unknown sources, and all of them, without exception, said the same thing afterward. I could never have planned it this way. That is the signature of providence. What the reasoning mind cannot design, imagination arranges with effortless precision. A man once came to me in despair, because the one business agreement on which he had placed all his hopes had collapsed. He told me it was the only chance he had. He felt ruined. I did not console him with arguments. I simply asked him to remain in the end of abundance, not in the path he had chosen, but in the result he desired. Weeks later, through a series of meetings he had not sought, he found himself in a venture far larger than the one that had failed. He later said to me, "If that first door had not closed, I would never have found the real one." Providence never robs you. It only removes the lesser so the greater may appear. But this cannot be seen while the heart is still clinging to the form instead of the state. When you live from the end, providence becomes a constant companion. Life begins to feel guided rather than fought. You are no longer forcing existence into shape. You are cooperating with an intelligence deeper than your fears and wider than your plans. And when this cooperation begins, you will notice something extraordinary. The world will start to feel friendly again. Not perfect, not without challenges, but friendly. You will sense an underlying order beneath the apparent disorder. And this alone will deepen your faith more than 1,000 teachings ever could. Now let me take you to the other side of this same mystery. For providence often wears the face of difficulty before it reveals itself as grace. This is why I tell you that obstacles are not enemies. They are unrecognized bridges. Every denial you ever received, every debt that ever frightened you, every failure that ever marked your memory, none of these are fixed facts. They are states, and states may be entered and exited. Nothing in your past is permanent, except what you continue to occupy in feeling. Men carry old defeats as though they were chains. Women carry past losses as though they were sentences that cannot be reversed. And yet the law has given you a key that can unlock every prison of memory. That key is called revision. Revision is not pretending the past did not happen. It is selecting a different seed from which the present will grow. For the past is not a frozen stone. The past is a living influence. And whatever you revise in feeling, you redeem in effect. If a man remembers a great loss and continues to feel it as loss, that loss continues to generate future losses. If a woman revisits a humiliation and feels it as humiliation, that state reproduces itself in new forms. Memory is not a record. Memory is a state re-entered. But if you dare to go into the scene and change its feeling, you change its creative power. If you were once denied and you revise the scene until you feel acceptance instead, the energy of denial is broken. If you once failed and you revise the scene until you feel success instead, failure loses its authority. If you were burdened by debt, and you revise the scene until with you feeling free and relieved, That past can no longer project chains into your future. I have seen men dissolve years of misfortune by revising a single memory that carried the emotional root of it all. I have seen women free themselves from lifelong patterns of scarcity by changing how one early disappointment felt in consciousness. Revision does not change the photograph of the world. It changes the negative from which all future photographs are printed. When an obstacle appears today, you need not fight it. You need only decide what it will mean. You may accept it as a wall, or you may reframe it as a doorway in disguise. And then you revise it until you feel it as a doorway. This is how bridges are built out of apparent wreckage. This is how denials become permissions. This is how failures quietly transform into foundations. The law does not ask you to forget your past. It asks you only to stop carrying it forward, unchanged. Go gently into any old scene that still tightens your chest. Do not reopen it to suffer again. Enter it only to rewrite the feeling. Let your former self leave that scene victorious, relieved, supported, successful, and then return to the present, knowing that the chain has been loosened. When the subconscious accepts the new version, the old pattern loses its claim across time. And then the most wondrous thing happens. What once stood as an obstacle behind you begins to serve as a bridge before you. The very circumstance that once defeated you becomes the lesson that saves you. The very delay that once humiliated you becomes the timing that protects you. The very debt that once crushed you becomes the discipline that stabilizes you. Nothing is wasted in consciousness. Everything is either a chain or a ladder, and which it becomes is decided not by what happened, but by how it is felt now. When you combine revision with the persistence of the end, the path becomes unstoppable. The past no longer pulls you backward. The present no longer intimidates you. The future no longer feels uncertain. You begin to walk with the quiet authority of one who knows that even his wounds must heal into wisdom. And when providence and revision operate together, life no longer feels like a series of accidents. It feels like a coherent unfolding in which even the darkest stones have been shaped to support your feet. This is the depth of the freedom that is being revealed to you now. Not only freedom from lack, but freedom from the tyranny of your own history. There comes a moment in every true transformation that feels almost unbearable in its stillness. You have practiced. You have changed your inner speech. You have softened fear. You have held the end in imagination. And yet the outer world seems unmoved. This is the final filter. This is the narrow gate through which only the persistent pass. It is the quiet stretch just before the waters break. The instant before dawn, when the night is darkest and the senses whisper, nothing is happening. This is the place where many turn back. Not because the law has failed them, but because impatience has convinced them it has. The seed is already swelling underground. Life is already shifting in unseen ways. But the eye sees only stillness, and the heart grows tired of believing without reward. This is not a punishment. It is a test of identity. It separates those who are visiting a state from those who have become it. Right here, just before the change, there is often a strange heaviness. Old thoughts return like ghosts, making one final appeal. Doubt speaks more loudly than before. Memory knocks. The world presents one last piece of contradictory evidence, as if to say, are you sure? And the answer you give in that moment determines everything. Those who abandon always do so at the threshold. They say, it hasn't worked, precisely when it is about to. They release the state just as it is becoming natural. They step out of the end and back into the old self, not knowing how close they were. And life, obedient as ever, reflects that withdrawal. But those who receive are the ones who remain still. They do not fight. They do not dramatize. They do not demand signs. They simply stay. They remain loyal to the feeling they chose, even while the outer world is silent. And because they remain, the outer world must eventually speak. I have seen this pattern repeat, without exception. Men and women who stood firm through that final desert always crossed into fulfillment. Those who turned back always said later, I felt foolish for believing so long. They did not realize that belief was the final requirement. This last stretch is not about effort, it is about identity. You do not persist by trying harder. You persist by being who you have already decided you are. When you no longer imagine to get, but imagine because it is natural, you have crossed the line. And when that line is crossed, the outer world cannot delay much longer. Now I tell you something that many do not wish to hear at first. Money is not the end of this journey. It never was. Money is a symbol. It is one of the earliest mirrors by which you discover the creative power of consciousness. It is close to the surface of life. It is practical. It is measurable. And because of this, it makes the lesson visible. But it is not the lesson itself. The law that brings you money is the same law that brings you health, harmony, love, protection, and meaning. The law is not specifically about wealth. It is about identity. It is about discovering that the world obeys your assumption of self. Money simply happens to be one of the first languages through which this discovery speaks, because it touches survival, freedom, and security so directly. When you begin to see this, a subtle shift occurs. You still welcome abundance, you still use it, you still enjoy it, but it begins to feel like a message rather than a goal. It says to you quietly, you are learning who you are. The law becomes a school. Each manifestation becomes a lesson. Each fulfillment becomes another mirror. And slowly, gently, without fanfare, the self that once thought it was chasing life begins to realize that life has always been answering it. Then something extraordinary happens. The desire for money softens, not because it is rejected, but because it is no longer charged with desperation. You no longer look to it as proof of worth. You no longer see it as the condition for peace. You begin to sense that peace was the condition that allowed it all along. It is here that the deeper awakening begins. And now, very quietly, the revelation that was always waiting begins to stir. The one who was speaking to money begins to sense that the voice was never traveling outward. The one who was listening begins to sense that the answer was never coming from somewhere else. The separation between the caller and the response grows thin. And one day, perhaps in a moment, with no drama at all, it is seen. I am the one who spoke. I am the one who listened. I am the one who answered. There is a sudden stillness when this is recognized, not excitement, not shock, a deep quiet, as if confusion has fallen away, and only simplicity remains. The one you called money is revealed as a garment worn by consciousness. The one you thought obeyed you is seen as something that arose from you. The distance you believed in dissolves. You begin to see that all along you were never trying to influence a world outside yourself. You were exploring the movement of your own being. You were watching your own assumptions take shape. You were feeling your own nature mirrored back to you in visible form. The source of all flow reveals itself not as a place you reach, but as what you are. You begin to sense that every name you ever spoke, money, abundance, support, opportunity, was simply a different way of addressing the same presence. And that presence was the I am. I am was the breath behind the affirmation. I am was the listener behind the inner dialogue. I am was the power behind the bridge of incidents. I am was the safety beneath the fear. I am was the law beneath the technique. And now, instead of feeling that you must command life, you feel that you are life. Instead of feeling that you must persuade the world, you feel that the world is a persuasion already completed by your own awareness. This is not a thought you adopt. It is a recognition that dawns. You do not lose your individuality here. You do not vanish. You do not become distant from the world. You become intimate with it. You feel it as yourself in another form. And in that intimacy, strain ends. From this place, you no longer affirm in order to change. You assume because it is your nature to choose. You speak not to compel, but to express. You imagine not to obtain, but to experience. And what you experience, inwardly still, moves outward. But now there is no anxiety attached to it. You were the magnet all along. You were the listener all along. You were the answer all along. And when this is felt, not as philosophy, not as poetry, but as identity, fear loosens its last grip. For how could the source be afraid of the stream? How could the giver fear the gift? How could the origin be anxious about the flow? The old story of chasing ends here. The new story is not about becoming. It is about remembering. And yet even this awakening does not remove you from the world. It gives you back to it with clarity. You still walk, You still work, you still choose, you still enjoy. But now without bondage, without trembling, without the sense that your life depends on outcomes. Money still comes, often more freely than ever, but it no longer defines you. It no longer frightens you. It no longer frightens you. It no longer commands you. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a servant in the house of the I Am. And now you begin to live from origin rather than from need. Now something very quiet, yet very powerful, begins to settle into place within you. You may not even notice it at first. There is no thunder in the sky, no trumpet sounds, but a deep shift has occurred. Money no longer stands above you. It no longer looms as a judge, a threat, or a master. It has fallen gently back into its true position as a tool in your hands. You still see it, you still use it, you still value its usefulness. But the tremor is gone, the tightness in the chest is gone, the sense that your life rises and falls with a number is gone. There is no more emotional dependency. You no longer look to money to tell you who you are. You no longer wait for it to grant you permission to feel safe, worthy, or free. This is a strange kind of freedom. It is not loud. It does not boast. It does not announce itself. It simply is. You notice it when a bill arrives and your body does not tense. You notice it when you spend and do not feel guilt. You notice it when you receive and do not feel surprise. You notice it when you think of the future and your breath stays calm. Money now moves in your life the way air moves in your lungs, necessary, present, but not worshipped. And in this very lack of worship, its flow becomes easier than it ever was when you chased it. There is no longer fear of loss, because you no longer see yourself as the one who can be emptied. There is no longer desperation for gain, because you no longer see yourself as the one who is lacking. You have crossed from having into being, and from that place, having becomes natural. This is not indifference. This is sovereignty. You will still plan. You will still choose. You will still act wisely in the world. But your actions are no longer fueled by panic. They are guided by clarity. And clarity always outperforms anxiety. Now you understand why so many who chase money never hold it, and so many who hold it lightly find it multiplying. It is not the grasp that gathers. It is the steadiness of the hand. And now that this steadiness has taken root, I leave you with something simple, something practical, something that will seal all that has been spoken tonight into living experience. Not as theory, not as inspiration, but as daily fact. As you prepare for sleep each night, let that moment be sacred, not dramatic. Sacred through simplicity. Sit quietly, let the body soften, let the breath slow, and then, in the privacy of your own inner chamber, speak to money as you now know how to speak, not as a beggar, not as a tyrant, but as one who is at ease with a faithful companion. You may say it aloud or silently. It does not matter. The subconscious hears both the same. Say, gently and with calm authority, you are with me. Say, you are faithful to me. Say, you multiply with me. Say, you belong with me. And as you say it, do not watch your bank account in the mind. Watch your feeling. Let yourself feel the ease of it being true. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw loosen. Let the stomach soften. Feel what it would be like to be carried by life instead of chasing it. Then let that feeling be the last thing you take into sleep. Do not visualize scenes with strain. Do not force pictures. Simply rest in the state. Sleep as the one who is already provided for. Sleep as the one who is already supported. Sleep as the one who is no longer bargaining with tomorrow. For sleep is the great gate through which impressions pass directly into the depth of being. What you feel as you fall asleep, you carry into creation without effort. Night after night, return to this state, not with tension, with familiarity, with the quiet warmth of someone who is returning home, and you will find something beautiful happening. You will begin to look forward to sleep, not because you are escaping the day, but because you are entering your own creative sanctuary, a place where the world rearranges itself without noise, a place where tomorrow is gently shaped without struggle. Now, before we part in words, I want to acknowledge you, You remained, you listened, you traveled the entire length of this teaching, and in doing so, you crossed more than time. You crossed a threshold of identity. Most never go this far. Most turn back when fear resists. Most abandon the work when it becomes quiet. But you did not. And because you did not, you now know something that few truly know, not as words, but as experience, that money is not the master, that fear is not the truth, that imagination is not fantasy, that you are not separate from the source of your life. There is still more to unfold. There is still the great art of revision, by which the past itself is healed. There is still the mystery of the body, by which even illness bows to assumption. There is still the deepest revelation of all, the eternal nature of the self that no circumstance can touch. Those doors will open in their own time. For now, walk gently, walk steadily, walk as one who no longer needs to prove anything to the world. You have touched the law, you have felt the shift, you have awakened to the beginning of your own authority, and the path from here only widens.